Yep. And none of y'all's names or anything comes up in the recording. That's just for me. And if you want that sent out to somebody, if there's something you hear or think would be helpful, we can get you the copy of the recording. Okay. So let's talk about sleep. Probably the most important thing that you've done today occurred last night. Probably what you were doing at 2 or 3 a.m. is the most important component of your entire day. So you guys are dealing with EEG or electrical current in the brain when you're running sessions. Okay, you put the headset on, that device is reading electrical current in your brain. Okay, and that current is running 24 hours a day, 7 days a week from the time you're born until the time you die. That current keeps the brain going. We never want that electrical current to go away. Well, the thing about that current is it has the capacity to go really, really fast, to go really, really slow, and to go in optimal speeds that involve creativity and focus. And that's kind of the hunt that a lot of us are on many times, right? Is how can my focus be better? How can I be more creative? How can I be more resilient? And within your brain, that's all right there. And we're trying to reinforce that in your brain during feedback. So when you notice the stopping and starting of the movie or the sound fading away or the screen dimming, that's because your brain has gone out to the extremes. It's gone too slow or too fast. And when you see everything come back online with the video, that's because your brain is in this optimal speed in the middle where focus and calm and being in the zone and creativity is. Well, what we're talking about today involves electrical current, but it involves it at the low end of the spectrum. So we run off of pretty much 0 to 35 hertz, 32 hertz. These are different speeds of brainwaves. So 1 hertz does one sine wave in 1 second. A 20 hertz does 20 sine waves in 1 second. Okay, that's very, very fast. We use all those fast ones to deal with crisis. We use 12 to 20 to kind of be calm, focused. That's kind of like the sweet spot of the brain. But below 20 is really where our brain goes to when it's trying to recover or when we do sleep. Sleep is a slowing down or a parasympathetic process in the brain where it's so amazing. What the brain does is it can downshift so much and get in these slow speeds, 1, 2, 3, 4, these slow speeds that it actually recovers and restores itself. When we go to sleep, the size of the brain, the inflammation in the brain is larger than when we wake up because the brain goes through this anti-inflammatory process where it actually is taking a lot of that stress and pulling it off so the brain is ready to go during the day. But the way it does that is by getting into these slow waves. So if you've ever had a sleep study, you've heard something like delta sleep. That's 0 to 4 hertz. That's delta. 4 to 8 is theta. We have that when we sleep, but we also have that when we're awake. When we're looking at a daytime EEG, if we see very low theta, that lets us know that person isn't getting the right restorative sleep. So the ratio that we're looking at of your theta is less than 2.0. We don't want to see that because that means there's not enough just innate level of theta in your brain to let you anchor in and sleep at night. We need that theta that lets us anchor into sleep. So if your sleep is restless, it's because there's not enough theta in there. Okay, you're not getting into those slow waves. So sleep is a parasympathetic or a slowing down of the brain. If you're having a problem with sleep, it means that on the flip side, there's too much sympathetic or fast going on. So if my brain is revving all day long, I might initially go to sleep really hard because of fatigue, but I'm not really cycling down into these deep brain waves. And what happens is just after a few hours, I pop right back out of sleep because I slept out of something called sleep debt. Okay, so there's two ways we sleep. It's out of sleep debt, meaning if I go hard enough, my brain has this backup mechanism that it will make me crash through a chemical process of something called adenosine. Adenosine. And that will build up. And the more I go without sleep and the more stress I add, adenosine builds up as a way to give me a kind of backup system if I'm going to make a dumb choice and not sleep. See, humans are the only creatures on the planet that purposely deprive ourselves of sleep. We're the only living things on the planet that choose to deprive ourselves of sleep. Okay. And that process, our body and brain is so smart that it says, if this dumb human won't go to sleep, I'm going to create a release of this backup chemical called adenosine that it gets so high, you have to go to sleep. Now, there's one thing that can block the adenosine, not one thing, the main thing that can block adenosine receptors is caffeine. Okay. So if we use caffeine, Red Bull, different things like that, it blocks the adenosine receptor from releasing. So it puts a cap over it. But what happens is the adenosine gets bigger and bigger, and it's still building. And then when that caffeine starts to wear off, instead of just kind of a natural sleepiness, there can be this massive crash that happens. And that's because the adenosine got released from the caffeine and it just blew up and made us go to sleep. So that's sleep debt. That's not what we were made to use for sleep. Most of us, we've lived our whole lives. That's the way we sleep. Okay. But it's not what we were created to do, is to sleep out of adenosine growing and sleep out of fatigue and debt. What we were meant to do is work off what is called a circadian rhythm, a sine wave. Okay. And that rhythm is based on some other chemicals in our body. Those two chemicals are cortisol, which is a form of adrenaline, and melatonin. Melatonin is not just something you buy at the store. It's a supplement for something that your body makes. So we talked about sleep debt. Now let's talk about, or sleeping out of sleep debt. Now let's talk about sleeping out of rhythm, what you were created to do. So what should happen in a human, because we are daytime creatures, is that sometime in the morning when the sun is rising, our body senses this. Some of this has to do with body temperature and some other things like that. You have this low temperature about 2, 3 a.m. And then all of a sudden the temperature starts rising in your body and the sun starts to rise. And all of a sudden the brain says, it's time to wake up. So in a natural functioning human sleep cycle, you should release a huge amount of adrenaline, not because you're being chased by a lion or there's some crisis going on, but in a natural rhythm of sleep is we release a lot of adrenaline called cortisol. Around 7 units of adrenaline get released those first few hours of daylight. Then by noon, those 7 units of adrenaline get down to about 2 units. So there's a huge drop in, and this is without stress going on. This is just normal rhythm of the body. So by noon, you're down to 2 units of adrenaline. By 5, 6 o'clock, by sunset time, you're down to about 1.5 units of adrenaline or cortisol. And then by bedtime, you should be less than 1. So it follows this curve: 6, 3, 1.5, less than 1. That's the curve of adrenaline in a normal functioning sleep cycle. Now, the inverse of cortisol is melatonin. Whatever cortisol does, melatonin is like a partner in a dance. Cortisol moves one way, the partner moves the other way. Okay. And the melatonin partner moves the other way, but it's always following cues from cortisol. So let me ask you this question. If cortisol is up in the morning, where should melatonin be? Down. Makes sense, right? Then as cortisol starts to drop off normally in the human adrenal system, what should melatonin start doing? It should start going up. When cortisol gets below 1, what should melatonin do? It should be it's getting close to its highest peak, which in a normal circadian rhythm, your highest peak of melatonin is going to happen right about midnight. Okay. So can you see this in your mind? You see the cortisol kind of going down, the sun sets, cortisol is going down. As the sun sets, melatonin goes from a morning daytime where it's low, and then it goes up to 12 o'clock at night where it's at the peak. And those two just dance in a perfect circadian rhythm. That's when the human body is functioning really, really well. Okay. A couple takeaways from that is if your most significant melatonin is happening at midnight, that does dictate when you should be setting your bedtime, because you want that to be about a couple hours into sleep. Okay, so if your bedtime is 11:30, that's not the same type of sleep as if you're going a little bit earlier to catch the huge melatonin window. I used to say this with a lot of the NBA teams that I worked with, where the coaches were like, you know, we got back at 6 a.m. from LA and we gave the guys 10 hours off so they could sleep 8 hours. And I'd say it would be better if you could get back at a normal circadian rhythm so they could get their 8 hours within the natural release of melatonin, because not all sleep is created equal. I'll say that again. Not all sleep is created equal. Okay. There is a certain quality of sleep that happens with the normal progression of our hormones that's super beneficial for my body. But me choosing to sleep from 1 a.m. to 9 a.m. is not the same, will never be the same as sleeping from 10 to 6 or 7, because that's a hormonal kind of thing that's happening. So let's look at this graph as we now get into sleep architecture. Like I said, there's we could spend hours on this talk here, but we're not going to do that. And let me see, where did I put it? Here it is. Okay. Okay, this is a graph of sleep architecture. Okay, at the bottom is an EEG. That's an electrical current. And this is happening even while you're sleeping. And what this device, which we have in our office, we have currently have 10 of these devices. 5 are out in the field and 5 are back home on inventory. But we send these out to measure what your sleep is really doing. Not like an Oura or a Fitbit or anything like that. This is real measuring EEG. Okay, so the bands are okay, but they're not truly reading your brain, because these different stages of sleep come from your brain. So a band that's measuring your movement, or a ring that's measuring your movement or your heart rate, is just trying to do an algorithm to tell you how much deep sleep you have and how much REM, but that's not reading your brain. Okay. And it's very important that periodically, if you are using devices to measure this stuff, that you cross-reference with real polysomnograph data so you can see, is this actually accurate? And there's been many people that, their Oura Ring is really good at picking up REM, but it's awful at picking up deep. Or it picks up both really well, or it doesn't pick up either very well. So you got to be really careful with those devices, because they might not always be perfect for what you're trying to understand. We have these that if you're ever interested in getting one of these, we usually recommend 2 or 3 nights. It's very non-invasive. The device is about the size of an iPhone with 3 little wires that go to the back of your head, and it reads EEG all night long. So this is a sleep architecture. Sleep is really kind of a very weak word for what we do at night. So if I said to you, hey, what did you do today? And you said, I was awake. I'd be like, okay, that's a little odd. Like you're doing more than just being awake, right? You would go through all the different things that you accomplished and worked on. And so when we talk about sleeping, we just say, well, I slept last night. Oh my goodness. What a misrepresentation of what you did. The most amazing thing that you did in the entire 24-hour cycle was sleep, because it's really cool, all the different things that go on here. So you see the different colors and the ups and downs. These are different states that the EEG is in, or cycling in different ways, so we can tell exactly what's going on. So the orange that you're seeing on here is how much the brain is awake. So this is somebody who slept from 11:29 p.m., which you already know what the problem with that one is, right? It's too close to melatonin's peak, to 7 a.m. So if I ask this person, how much did you sleep last night? They would probably tell me 7.5 hours. But if I look at all the awakenings while they were sleeping, which totaled 53 minutes after they went to sleep and 26 minutes before they went to sleep, this person wasn't asleep for 7.5 hours, were they? They were awake for 53, and it took them 26 to go to sleep. So they had about an hour and a half of their 7.5 that they weren't sleeping. The brain was awake. This person may not even know that they were this restless. It just may be normal to them. And that's the way we are as humans, is we just normalize to things. But this is not healthy, to only be getting basically 6 hours of sleep. And they're thinking, I got 7.5 hours of sleep. No, they didn't. They got 6 hours. So that's the first thing right out of the bat. Then we calculate off of that, what is the sleep efficiency? So the whole recording on a sleep study is called total sleep time, or total in bed time. Okay. Then you take total sleep time and you make a ratio of that, and that tells you how efficient they are. This person's efficiency, much like your efficiency in the office, how much did I get done today? Their sleep efficiency is 82%. So they're in the office and they're getting 82% done. But in the sleep world, they need to be getting 92% done. So every day, not even in the amount of hours, but just in their efficiency, they're off. Efficiency and hours. So orange is awakenings. Very important to know that. You see the gray in there, that's called light sleep. So your brain kind of starts to gear down as you go. First it's awake, then if you see a little bit of gray, you saw that, and then all of a sudden it went into blue. Well, that gray is light sleep. Light sleep comprises about 50% of your sleep. It's kind of the vehicle that gets you from point A to point B. It's what's transferring you into deep sleep or into REM sleep, which are the two most important things you do at night. Okay. So it goes through light sleep, and then all of a sudden you see the dark blues. Well, that's where the magic's happening. Okay. This is really cool what's happening here. All of a sudden, the factory turns on. You start making hormones like testosterone and progesterone and estrogen and all these essential things that you need to be able to function later in the day. The factory workers, when that blue comes on, man, they're like making this stuff left and right. One of the big epidemics, especially for males later in life, is low testosterone. Okay. And everybody's just injecting testosterone, doing different things related to testosterone. But if they would fix their deep sleep, this is the factory where you make testosterone. We saw this in the NBA, where we tracked this for years. And because of the rigorous sleep schedule, these guys would go from 24-year-old elite testosterone levels to, in 9 months, they would look like 55-year-old testosterone levels. Why? Because they weren't getting deep sleep, because their sleep cycles were out. Man, I could talk about this forever, but I won't. So let's move on. The light blue, this is the real magic. Okay, this is like really awesome. This is REM sleep. Oh my goodness, it's the coolest thing. REM sleep is really that problem that you solved today happened here. Studies have been done over and over again. If you give somebody a problem and you have them solve it 8 hours later in the day, then you give them a problem at night and have them solve it when they wake up, over and over and over, the people that are sleeping on that problem solve it much better, statistically significant. Why? Because they have the magic of REM. REM is where we solve problems. It's where the brain does its work. And the biggie, this is kind of the holy grail for memory consolidation. Memory happens here. See, during the day, you come through life and you have this cup and you fill it with things that happen, experiences. Then at night, those are what we call short-term memory. But at night, during the magic of REM, it takes the lid off and it pours out all the short-term memories, and it goes through and says, what do we need? We need this, we need that, oh, we don't need that. And it takes those memories, and the ones that it needs, it etches on your long-term memory. Many times those are ones because the hippocampus, where we store memories, is right next to the amygdala, where a lot of emotions are. Many times those are keyed into emotional things. That's why we remember things in our past that are emotional. So memory, REM is super important. As you can see here, maybe it's not as succinct, but what should happen is the first 4 hours of sleep should primarily be deep sleep. So you can see how the deep kind of winds away, but then we get more REM as we go. So the first 4 hours of your sleep is all about restoring your body, and the last 4 hours is all about REM, investing in your brain. Well, man, I could keep going. I can't. We got to finish. So let me just leave you with a couple things to work on. Okay. First of all, the biggie. This is so important. Your circadian rhythm, not sleep debt, but circadian rhythm is rooted in light. We respond to light as humans. Even animals do. The reason animals migrate is not because of temperature. It's because the light is getting less and they're looking for more light. Okay? As humans, we need light, and it's very important to us. One, just vitamin D in general, being outside. But our circadian rhythm is super dependent upon the first 3 to 4 hours of light. That first, if you measured the horizon, the first 30 degrees of sun is super important to our circadian rhythm. Very important. If you're working on your sleep, you say, I need my sleep to get better. First thing I can say to you is get out in the light, not by a window, because the difference in foot candles can go from 1,000 by a window to 20,000 right outside in the sunlight. And we need those foot candles. Okay. So you got to get outside, first of all. And then the other thing about that morning light is it's the blue spectrum that has a huge impact on us. So for those of you that really have difficulty in sleep, I'd strongly recommend using, along with getting outside, using a blue light in the morning for at least 20 to 30 minutes. Very, very important. Very important for people with seasonal affective disorder, because the reason the depression is happening is because of the changes in light. We know that from the equator, 30 degrees up and higher, you're going to have higher prevalence of depression because of the differences in light, which is related to differences in sleep. Okay, they're all connected. Depression and sleep, they go hand in hand. Okay, light in the morning, very important. And then thinking about light at night. As the sun is setting, it's very important to help trigger that melatonin by watching that sun kind of go away. Catch those sunsets. Look up into the sky. Be aware of what time it is. More red and yellow happens at that time, and that's what helps induce more melatonin. So while we wanted a lot of blue in the morning, we want no blue at night, because it'll kick up our cortisol. And think about this. What happens if my cortisol goes up? My melatonin goes down. Cortisol responds to the blue light. We don't want melatonin going down. The other thing that can impact cortisol is stress. So if I have something that's making me stressful at 5 o'clock at night, my adrenaline goes up. What's going to happen to my melatonin? Down. And then it's hard for me to get the melatonin I need to sleep. Okay. So thinking about doing more relaxing things in the afternoon, like taking 4 minutes to breathe, super helpful for keeping that melatonin in a position that it can start to take off and not let the cortisol overrun you. Okay. There's a lot more things that we can talk about. Last thing I would say, if you're interested in a sleep study like this, we do those for $250. They're great, and they give you a lot of helpful information. I meet with you for an hour, and we walk through all of it. Love talking about this stuff and helping you. And then the other thing is we have hormone samples that we send out to a lab that we can get 4 different samples of your saliva from the morning, noon, late in the day, and evening. You should know, what are we looking for there? We're looking for your cortisol, because that helps us map out the circadian rhythm and whether you're having rises in adrenaline or cortisol late in the day that you shouldn't be happening, that we know the inverse of that is melatonin. So you're suppressing your melatonin. We don't want that to happen. Okay, guys, I love this topic. I love it. I wish we could talk for hours on it, but I want to be respectful of your time. So we'll call it good on this part. Adam, do we have any questions out there? I don't see a bunch of interaction in the chat.
We had one question come in from Sherry. She
Okay.
asked, how do you know if you need to supplement with melatonin, and how many milligrams should you take if so?
Excellent. Great question. So getting some of this data is super helpful for that. There is a couple things you want to think about on melatonin. Just if like you're not going to get the data, just some general concepts is, if you're having problems getting to sleep, then an initial base melatonin is helpful for that. So it's about 30 minutes before you're going to go to bed. Take your melatonin, maybe start with 3 milligrams or 5 milligrams. There's a great product we use, which is called Sleep 3, which has an initial melatonin, but then it has a long-acting melatonin. So if you're one of those people that wakes up at 2 in the morning, guess what's happening? You're shifting from deep sleep into REM sleep, and your brain's not liking that, and it's waking you up. You want more of a time release melatonin. Okay. There's a lot more that we could get into that, but what helps me make that decision for people is seeing their cortisol and knowing what's going on with that will let me know what the melatonin's doing. And also seeing if they're having a lot of these awakenings at certain times that might change the type of melatonin, long acting or short acting. There's also something called phosphatidylserine, which has a lot to do with blood sugar levels throughout the night. So as you get a little bit older, the lining of the cells have a little bit more difficult time regulating sugar and insulin. And so we can go into these crisis responses when we're sleeping, which of course does what? Wakens us up. A lot of times I tell people, first thing you need to do when you wake up is just get a little snack of something that has some protein or fats in it, because there might be more of a blood sugar thing going on there. And that's a good way to start. And then if you've done the breathing work that we do in the Inner Armor Resilience program, which I don't know if all of you out there are doing that, but that's super important for learning your breathing and heart rate work. That's what you want to do if you wake up in the middle of the night. Any more questions, Adam? I see another click on the chat.
No, I just sent through the Sleep 3 link to Amazon there in case anybody wanted that. But that was it for questions.
Anybody want to add anything before we go? What are we all going to do tonight? We're going to avoid blue light, and we're going to try to get in bed in time so that we can really take advantage of what's called the sleep window, which is right around that 10 o'clock, 10:30 time. That's hard for me to do sometimes, but yes. Okay. Let's become great sleepers, guys. It's what carries us into the next decade, is that sleep, sleep, sleep. It's a beautiful gift we've been giving. I calculated last night as I was going off to sleep. I've been sleeping for about 19 years of total sleep, because it's a third of my life and I'm 58. So I've spent a lot of time sleeping. So think about your life, how old you are. A third of that number, you've been sleeping, hopefully a third. Okay. Okay. Peace, guys. We love having you in the program. If you need anything, please let us know. We have another lecture next month. We're going to be talking about focus and creativity, how to get more focus, how to be more creative. That'll be our lecture. If anybody ever has a topic that you're really interested in, you want to throw into queue, just let us know. We would love to address that. But for right now, I'm just kind of hitting the top ones and we'll go from there. Adam, anything else?
All good. All good. A lot
Okay.
of thank yous. A lot
Yes,
of thank
thank
yous.
you.
So.
Love it. Okay, guys, enjoy your day. We'll see you. Okay.